Hello and welcome, all you monsters, humans, and a few humans. I'm Duuz-Diz-Din coming at you with another Star versus the Forces of Evil episode review. This time I'm going over Season 4's episode 16, Side A, titled Beach Day. It's finally here. It's the fated day of the beach, where we see Star and Marco actually kind of chilling out, just eating pancakes, having the perfect summer day. And only for Marco's mom to actually find Star's old swimsuit, apparently thawing out in the freezer or something because as Star puts it, her closet's only for secrets. So it's just like, what? Okay, whatever you say, Star. And we also see Marco's dad, being one of those doting parents who's taking plenty of baby pictures of all of Mariposa's first. And seeing the swimsuit and the, instant photo camera thingy, whatever, she starts to realize today's the day, the beach day. It's finally time for the prophecy to be fulfilled. And Star is determined for this to be the perfect day, exclaiming the old Phineas and Ferb adage, I know what we're gonna do today. So Star and Marco set off, with Marco, having noticed that apparently he has a zit, and he also has a zit in the beach day photo. He's all about like trying to subvert that whole situation. However, their taxi ends up being held up on the interstate because apparently a truck carrying goats has spilled out onto the road, so traffic's going to be backed up for a while. So Star actually does the one thing that you never would have expected, that everyone would have loved to have in this kind of a situation, and she gives the taxi wings, but apparently the taxi driver is not about this. More than likely because he'll probably end up losing a lot of money out on her just having the car fly. So he just dumps them out after she puts his car down. So they're kind of at a loss as to what to do next. But Star brings out Cloudy and they go flying off, only for the smog in the city skies to completely just, ruin Cloudy's lungs. So they end up just walking. And Marco even remarks to the fact that it seems like the forces of reality and time are conspiring against them. But Star is completely determined that this will be the perfect day, despite the fact that they just don't know which way the beach is. But after a seagull steals Marco's sandwich, they realize that this is the perfect way to find the beach itself, and they are led to the beach, which is actually a good way of finding a beach. Even when you're out at sea, if you see seagulls, you are near land. So she goes in to find her camera, but apparently not only did she lose her camera, she also lost the beach day photo. And after kind of having a bit of a breakdown over this, Marco tells her, just like, why don't we just have fun, Why don't we just forget about all that and actually enjoy ourselves for the most part? And they do just that, just playing on the beach, having fun, and turning Marco into a sand mermaid. Only for an older woman to come up saying that she saw them having so much fun, she couldn't help but snap a picture of it. It just seemed so perfect. Thus recreating the beach day photograph. And at first they celebrate this because they finally reached that point. Everything came full circle to where it needed to be. But once Star starts to actually think about it for a while, she kind of loses the happiness she originally had. And she goes over to Father Time to just kind of ask him about this situation, as to why she, even after taking this photo, she doesn't feel happy anymore. She actually, it feels fleeting. And, she thought that once she reached this point, she would be fine. Everything would just kind of roll credits, fade to black, are happily ever after. But she now feels more anxious than ever because now she's uncertain of the future. And Father Time explains that, well, you seem pretty happy in the photo, and you're the one who told me to give it to your past self in order to actually give you some confidence for the future. And Star's a bit at a loss because it basically means that everything up to this point has, to her at this moment, feels like basically a lie. It creates this weird time loop where her future self gave it to Father Time to give to her past self, just to kind of push her forward for the most part, using a lie that she pinned all her hopes and dreams on. And Father Time is just like, yeah, well, if you want me to destroy it, I can, It's not like it had that much of a significance to you. It's not like you would have, it's not like it had any real meaning. You could have easily gotten to this point without it, right? So what if things might end up changing slightly for your future? And once Star kind of dwells on this, she realizes, yeah, this picture got her through a lot of rough times. And I really like this because to a certain degree, it creates a interesting paradox that doesn't actually mean that it really had that much of a significant meaning, but at the same time it does. Star could have gone through all those things without having the photo, but having the photo made it that much easier to get through all those tough times. Not having her mom around, the whole battle with Meteora, the situation with Eclipsa. Just all these situations that were just made a lot more tolerable just having this photo around. So ultimately, Star relents in saying that no, this should definitely go to my past self. I needed this more than I could ever realize. And while she's kind of bummed that she won't have this photograph going forward from here on out, she knows that her previous self needed it that much more. And so she just snaps a picture of it with her compact. And as Star goes to leave, and says goodbye and thank you to Father Time notes as Star leaves that, the worst things are yet to come. And he kind of, ends his little moment by, writing on the picture Beach Day, showing, giving the whole basis behind that photograph. And as Star sits looking out at the sea, she kind of wonders about the future, no longer having that basically a safety blanket to tell her that everything going forward would be alright. And Marco's just like, well, yeah, that just makes you like the rest of us who don't know if everything's gonna work out. And for the most part, that photo didn't really do too much. As I was saying, he tells her, that photo didn't really do too much. With or without it, you still made those choices going forward. You still, in the heat of the moment, decided what needed to be done. Yeah, it might have helped you get through moments when you were all alone or just, by yourself, but it was you all along. It was you in the end. You helped move these things forward for the most part when push came to shove, using your own will. So, Star, for the most part, accepts this, ready to face whatever comes next, as she gives a nearby shopping cart wings to take her and Marco home, thus ending the beach day, and thus fulfilling the ancient prophecy. We then turn over to the B plot, which is titled Gone Baby Gone, which, funny enough, is actually kind of, I believe that's a movie title, which kind of took me off guard for the most part. Where we see Marco is actually, giving a little hand puppet performance to Meteora and Mariposa, as he's actually, apparently the babysitter for the two of them, for when the parents go out. And, he's actually having a nice fun time, though Meteora still doesn't, quite like Marco, and Mariposa is still very much in love with her big brother. Only for Marco to be met with Hekapoo as, he puts the two to bed, where, Hekapoo kind of berates him for being Eclipse's, babysitter, but Marco's fine with just being a babysitter because he knows he's the best. He is the best big brother. But Hekapu notes to Marco that, hey, some weird stuff is going down on Muni. No, you always have a tendency to get involved, so do yourself a favor and don't. And this might seem like a little bit of a Deus Ex kind of situation, but Hekapu is sweet on Marco to no end. Even when they had that situation where Hekapu was mad at Marco for keeping the whole star, opening those portals all over dimensions thing to himself, they still hang out. They still go on adventures together from time to time. She might not take him on her missions like she did before, but they still hang out like friends. And, despite the fact that Hekapu seems to have a completely different personality when she's in her magical high commission Hekapu mode, she still seems to have this very sweet spot for Marco no matter what. So this kind of keeps in line with that, where it's just like, no, they would never be in a relationship. There's still that deep-rooted feelings they have for each other, where they'll go out of their way to help each other out. But Marco takes this to Star being like, hey, is there anything you know about that we should probably be worried about? But Star's not quite sure. But this, moment reminds her that she needed to take a few pictures of Meteora and Mariposa together. But when they go in to snap a few photos of the sleeping babbies, they notice that Hekapu actually left her other portal open for which she came in through the nursery. And they end up coming to the startling realization that Meteora and Mariposa crawled right through into the Never Zone. So Marco and Star have to go on through, and they find that things have changed yet again, but that's because decades have passed since the last time they were there. Centuries, for the most part. And though they might age differently, there's still the fact that when they go in there from time to time, it's a whole different ball game, which makes me wonder if that one Squire girl is dead now at this point. So they end up calling up Brunzetta, who I completely butchered her name the last appearance that she made, but whatever. Marco calls upon Brunzetta to give them some advice, and Brunzetta, because ultimately so much time has passed, she has no recollection of Star at this point. Marco, yes, because they spent so many years together, but Star, it's what's one day within several centuries. Sorry, Star. But Marco simply asks Brunzetta for some directions on where to go about the babies, and after Brunzetta tells him about the witches who live on the mountain, he just kind of pieces off because ultimately this was more of a family situation, which is weird because I'm just like, well, why not include her on the adventure? But Brunzetta gets her own version of the disappointment she gave Star because it's just like, man, my friend only wanted to just ask for directions. Bummer. And, Marco's kind of down on himself because of the fact that, he kind of ended up just leaving them into the Never Zone, which isn't a place for babies. And once they make it up to the place where the old crone is, he tells them about the fact that they're looking for their family. And I love the way while he's able to explain, Mariposa as his little sister, the relationship between Star and Meteora is kind of weird. But the witch actually goes on the offensive and attacks him, where it's revealed to actually be Meteora and Mariposa, now grown up into teenagers because, it's that 15-year gap thing that they like to do. So now, Meteora and Star engage in this beam struggle, and after they notice that Star is able to do magic, they actually decide to talk things out with Star and Marco, revealing their names in this dimension to be where Meteora goes by Grob in this dimension, Mariposa goes by Gort, Uh, Something along those lines. I heard the way they pronounced it was so weird that I couldn't quite catch it in certain areas. But I'm just gonna call them Meteora and Mariposa. That's just easier for me for the most part. And they invite the two back to their cave. However, it's made very known by Meteora that, despite the fact that they've never met in this reality, Meteora still doesn't much care for Marco's face, which is especially hilarious because of the fact that Mariposa looks exactly like Marco in drag for the most part, just a little bit thicker. And, she basically looks like Princess Turdina, and it's just like the fact that she's best friends, as they call themselves even here, sisters basically, in the Never Zone. She still locks onto Marco with this animosity for the most part. And they bring them back to their cave and talk about the, tougher climate that's been going on for them for the most part. And while Mariposa is kind of down on herself for not having the same magical powers that Meteora had, and Meteora was able to learn from the various witches of the mountain and unlock various magical powers, Mariposa has more or less gotten fairly good at just general hand-to-hand combat. And once they asked Marco and Star about the fact that they kind of abandoned them in the Never Zone, Marco tries to make it known that he didn't abandon them, it's just that they wandered in there, and since time flows differently, they weren't able to get to them till now. But, Meteora puts this to rest by serving them, some soup, only for it to be laced with sleeping powder. And they bring the two to this massive magical door and summon this specific being called Wisecan the Granter, who is this very flamboyant vampire-esque being. And when they try to turn over Star, this magical creature, over Wisecan, they hope to give Mariposa the same magical powers that Meteora has. However, once it's revealed that this would basically involve feeding Star to Wisecan, well, Meteora has no problems doing this, as Meteora is kind of detached to certain people, to a certain extent. She only has specific people that she cares about. Meteora has a little bit more general empathy, and isn't quite down with sacrificing someone just like that. However, when Marco tries to talk to Mariposa about this whole situation, Mariposa doesn't really want to hear anything from Marco, not really recognizing her as her brother. But Marco, while he accepts that she might not see him as her brother, he does see that she knows that this whole situation is very wrong. It is not something that she should do. So Mariposa decides that she will not sacrifice Star to Wisecan, and says that if he wants to eat her, he'll have to go through her. And Wisecan is all too willing to have a little fun with Mariposa and the others. So Meteora sends out a magical blast, but Wisecan simply eats this magical power, with Marco saying that defeating him with magic is the way they have to do it through physical means, which Wisecan is all too happy to oblige Marco on. So a fight breaks out between Wisecan and Mariposa, but he starts to gain the upper hand, so it becomes a tag team with Mariposa and Marco against Wisecan. And both Star and Meteora admit to the fact that both Marco and Mariposa are fairly good at physical combat, to the point where, even Meteora admits that at one point Mariposa even kicked her ass. But once they kind of get pushed back, Marco plans something out with Mariposa using the garlic spiders that are nearby on the mountain. And when Mariposa restrains Wisecan, Marco takes the garlic spiders and shoves it into Wisecan's lower mouth, which basically sickens him. Whereas while he's not too opposed to Garlic, he isn't too crazy about having spiders crawling around in his gut, which I can't blame him for, and he basically just retreats. And while we have a nice little bonding moment between Mariposa and Marco, she still does not recognize Marco as her brother. However, once Marco notices the necklace is the puppet he had been using for the puppet show earlier, it gives Mariposa a, kind of realization that, oh, you are my brother, because she still has that memory from all that time, which is kind of wild. But Mariposa's like a little over a year old, I think. And so I know a few people who actually do have memories that far back, but dude, I can barely remember anything beyond when I was like 5. But okay, whatever. But once Meteora ends up confronting him over the fact that once they go back, it's just like, won't they just be babies? And, they're not really crazy about the fact of living life over again. And even when Star kind of, tries to tell him, it's just like, you have a loving family, you have all this stuff to go back to, they still just kind of pass, not wanting to be separated in any capacity. And Marco and Star are kind of at a loss until they tell him, hey, you'll have good food. Because, that's the biggest thing for these two, is that they've been struggling to actually find food where they're living at. And once Star kind of sweetens the deal about all the various types of food they'll have, they agree to go back on the only on the condition that they still get to grow up together, showing just how deep their bond is. Very much how Star and Marco's bond is, which, it's just very sweet. It's a very nice thing that they just had this, very close childhood of just growing up together. And so, Marco brings them back. They revert to babies, which immediately makes me wonder if they'll have any recollection of everything, since Marco remembers everything that went on in the Never Zone. I have to wonder if they'll remember anything, especially since Mariposa still remembers the finger puppet. Not to mention, why is the finger puppet still old? Then again, Marco does... the way that things clothing goes through the Never Zone isn't consistent for the most part, because sometimes Marco will go into the Never Zone and he'll get all of his bad boy clothes on, but when he only ever came back through with his older Marco clothes that one time, and now whenever he goes through, he just switches back to his normal clothes. So it's very inconsistent how that works. But Marco's just happy to have his little sister and Meteora back, and Mariposa is happy to be with her big brother. A very sweet episode, a very nice episode, and it was great to see an older Mariposa and Meteora. It's gonna make great fodder for fans creating a future AU of Mariposa and Meteora. It was cool to see Meteora in her teen years, because she was actually pretty awesome. I would love a spin-off with the two of them. But, a great episode, and just seeing the various instances of time going forward and backward and all that. Lots of time manipulation in this series of just how you need things to reaffirm certain things. Just positive influences to help you through. With Star, it was the whole situation with the photo actually being this safety net for her going forward, and this whole situation with Mariposa. She was taught this niceness and empathy from Marco at a young age, and it stuck with her all the way into her teen years. So I very much enjoyed that theme going on there. And I want you to tell me what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Did you enjoy the basically a time loop that we got out of, the beach episode, where Star is giving this self-fulfilling prophecy and is basically used to, motivate Star to move forward? Or did you prefer, Gone Baby Gone, and just seeing the older Meteora and Mariposa and what we will soon have in the future? We still have yet to see an older Star, though. I'm still waiting on that. I would love to see what Star looks like when she's, in her 20s or 30s. But this was a good episode for the most part. I really enjoyed every aspect of it. And if you like this video, feel free to leave me a like. And if you didn't, feel free to leave me a dislike and tell me what I did wrong in the comment section below so I can better myself for future videos. And how about subscribing and hitting the bell icon so you'd never miss another episode review of Star vs. the Forces of Evil. And if you want to find me on social media, feel free to Google Duuz-Diz-Din. I am everywhere, for better or for worse. And remember that the past is always your guiding light to the future. Bye-bye.